Hello everyone, welcome back to Halloween Horrorfest 4 Listmaster. This week, which is our third week of Halloween Horrorfest, is Haunted House Week. So, Kyle, do you want to start us off with our first day?
Sure. On October 15th, we will be watching Crimson Peak, directed by Guillermo del Toro.
On October 16th, we'll be watching His House, directed by Remi Weeks.
On October 17th, we'll be watching The Haunting, directed by Robert Wise.
On October 18th, we'll be watching Poltergeist, directed by Tobe Hooper.
On October 19th, we're watching House, directed by Nobuhiko Obayashi.
On October 20th, we'll be watching The Others, directed by Alejandro Amenábar.
And on October 21st, for our palate cleanser, we're watching Beetlejuice, directed by Tim Burton.
Okay, so do we want to start off with favorites?
Yeah, I think. Why don't you tell us your favorite? Josie was responsible for picking most of the movies, all the movies of this week.
Yeah.
So
you did get to
it only fits.
Help a little bit, I guess, but mainly it was me. Yeah. So I think my favorite out of all of these is by far House or Hausu.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, I remember the first time we watched it, and it is just so fun the whole way through. It's crazy.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, very much recommend. The effects are fun. There's a cat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was lots of bonus points for cat.
Always, yeah.
So, yeah, that's definitely my favorite.
Yeah, it's definitely very crazy, but in a really good way. The effects are very good. It's fun to watch, and yeah, an enjoyable movie. Mm-hmm. I think I've only seen a couple of the movies on this week's list. Actually, that's not true. I've seen all but two.
Yeah, you haven't seen
The Haunting or The Others.
Yeah, but everything else you've seen.
But I've seen everything else. I think my pick is going to be Poltergeist, just a classic, straight-up horror movie. Tobe Hooper, a classic horror director. Started out with The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a classic Tobe Hooper feature film. Been on this list before.
Mm-hmm.
But Poltergeist is an industry standard. I think, a well-beloved horror movie. Theo wants to get involved. He's asking for fetch. It's not a poltergeist moving things around behind us. But I think Poltergeist is just a great movie. It holds up pretty well. It remains pretty creepy. There are definitely some scary moments in that movie. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. Do you enjoy haunted house movies in general?
I think they're fine.
There are different categories of haunted house movie.
Yeah, they're often very, I don't know. They're so metaphorical and often kind of heavy-handed with the metaphors.
That's just sort of how Gothic.
Yeah, and so they're often sad and kind of slow. In the case of Crimson Peak, lots of longing and ancient sadness. So they can be done well. I think the effects need to be done well, and there has to be something. The story either has to be very, moving and I think sentimentally effective, or you have to just commit to something that's not that. So my suggestions for this week's category were The House on Haunted Hill, which we happen to have had before on a previous list, so I just forgot that it was on there. Mm-hmm. But it's a classic. This is the remake, not the original Castle Pictures House on Haunted Hill.
Is that 99? In the 90s.
Yeah, late 90s, right before 2000s. But a great, fun movie that, commits to the bit and is fun. I also think that 13 Ghosts is another great haunted house movie, but neither of those is especially fitting within this kind of more gothic and metaphorical category. Those are just kind of scary ghosts.
Yeah, there's definitely the gothic horror haunted house, and then there's sort of the shift that happened around the the 90s. I feel like Poltergeist even fits into this realm where it was like post-Amityville, where it's like, it's more of like religious American, like modern haunted house rather than like Gothic Victorian haunted house.
Yeah, I think the Gothic Victorian style keeps up. I'm not sure that I could track it myself through like the 90s and early 2000s, but it certainly doesn't go away. Those, well, a lot of the original stories for those are just, they exist.
Right.
And so they do tend to resurface periodically in new, versions. We just had the whole run of the Flanagan Haunting of Bly Manor, Haunting of Hill House, which are very much that kind of sad ghost, which I think were fine. But, the late 90s, 2000s was doing its own thing with horror. It was going in a different direction and was not very much, these more metaphorical, emotional kind of deeper meaning movies. It was just about getting like as many, 12 to 19-year-olds in the seats as you possibly could. And so it was like the more rock and roll and like action and cuts and like effects that you could throw in it, the more that you can jam into a trailer. And that's the goal, is to like produce a trailer that's going to get a bunch of teenagers in the seats, because that's how you make money. Which wasn't a bad approach. It just left, I think, a lot of movies that don't have much beyond like the initial surface, which I think can be fine. Like sometimes those are really fun to watch. I really enjoy going back and watching like all of the Dark Castle, which is what the Castle remake production house was. I like watching the Dark Castle pictures. They're often really fun, but there's not that much to them. Yeah. And the movies that we have in this list this year, I think, basically across the board, all have something deeper going on. Yeah.
I feel like what you said about the Flanagan resurgence is true, but I do think that maybe Crimson Peak was a precursor to that, because that's 2015. And Guillermo del Toro has like said explicitly that he was inspired by the sort of earlier 60s era of haunted houses that were Gothic movies, like The Haunting, which is on this list, and like The Innocents, which is based on Turn of the Screw, which was almost on this list, but was sort of similar to The Haunting in my mind, and also similar to the others. So
yeah, I mean, Guillermo, I feel like there's been a lot of discussion about what happened with Crimson Peak and the just general reception of Crimson Peak. Yeah. Because I don't think it did well when it came out.
It's very silly. Like, especially toward the end, it gets so silly.
Right, but I think that there has been kind of a critical reevaluation of it now that horror has turned back to a bit more of a serious kind of direction, where people are like, this actually is like an interesting idea, executed pretty well.
Yeah, like, the sets are not bad.
Yeah, the sets are cool. The costuming is very cool.
Very cool.
And like the cinematography, I think, is like so like all of the reds and the fog, and it's all
just the image of the red snow. Very, very cool.
Yeah, and I think if I'm remembering right, there are some like nighttime shots of ghosts and things that feel very almost like giallo-y, just like bright colors and things bouncing around that are really interesting, and that people in 2015 weren't quite ready for.
I will say though, the ghosts toward the end, which I will not spoil it by saying who the ghosts are at the end, but not very good.
No, I think that was a killer too. Yeah. Even if you were on board for a lot of it, when you get to like the special effects at the end, it's just like, this is tough. That's the same critical disaster with House on Haunted Hill, which I believe is a truly solid and pretty good movie up until the ghost at the end, which is just abysmally bad, and it like immediately loses you as a viewer. You're just like, this looks so stupid. Like, I can't do it.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about His House?
Yeah, it's been a while since we saw it. I do think that is probably the heaviest metaphor of all of it? It's like really obvious.
Well, sure, but I think that it's taking something that has been done a million times and
doing it in a different
applying
way.
it to a new situation.
Yeah.
That is like very underrepresented
Yeah.
in movies in general.
So his house is about
refugees.
a refugee family
From South Sudan?
Yeah.
I think.
But they are in the UK.
Yes.
And are in tenement housing, I believe, or some kind of government-provided refugee housing, and are dealing with a haunting that I think is meant to symbolize the change in cultures and what they've left behind. It's a lot of like the situation in the country from which they're fleeing, as well as confronting kind of being in a new place, the guilt of leaving, plus the like discomfort and challenges that they face in the new setting.
But I think it's pretty well done.
Yeah. This came out, what year was it?
I want to say
2020.
Very recently.
But not, I mean, that's 4 years ago.
Yes.
And it is,
compared to the other ones on this list, pretty recently.
But I remember it made a little bit of a splash, but not, I don't think it was like huge. It was a direct to Netflix. Yeah.
And it, like, I don't think really got any awards when it came out, but it has a very high rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and it might have 100 right now.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that good. But it's solid for sure.
Yeah, and there's some genuinely scary parts of it. Like the visuals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. The Haunting, which is based on The Haunting of Hill House, has had many, many remakes at this point. Robert Weiss also directed what movies? Not horror. But very, very big movies.
Well, I don't know.
So he's
Twilight.
done. No. He died in 2005 or something like that. So.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if. Yeah.
Can you give me a like genre?
Musicals.
Oh, nope.
No, but like big musicals.
Rent.
No.
I don't know.
Older than that.
I don't know. Singing in the Rain. He didn't do Singing in the Rain. Oklahoma.
He did West Side Story and Sound of Music. And he did the editing for Citizen Kane. So Robert Weiss is a big deal.
Extremely old. I guess The Haunting is old.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
from the 60s. That's why I kept being like, roll it back.
Yeah.
But The Haunting is really good. I'd actually seen the remake with Lily Taylor and Catherine Zeta-Jones before I saw this one. And I was like, this is fine, I guess. And then when I watched this one, it felt like eerily similar, but it's much better. And the acting is just like very camp, very fun. So it's a good time. So the others I chose because I feel like it is similar to Crimson Peak in that it is like a similar idea but updated for a certain time. And I feel like each of them has like a different representation of a similar concept for like at least Crimson Peak, His House, The Haunting, the others. And I feel like Poltergeist is kind of in there too. Hausu and Beetlejuice are in sort of realms of their own where they're a little more like wacky ghosts rather than sad ghosts with sad pasts.
That's the nature of, Beetlejuice as our palate cleanser. It's, more of a fun idea. For some reason, I just knew that Beetlejuice, the guy, is a ghost in that movie. Even though I feel like it's not that explicit. That he's a ghost.
Couple are ghosts.
That's true.
Yeah. I think he's just sort of like a supernatural entity. I don't know for sure that he is like...
I think he's a ghost.
I don't think he's singular in that way.
No, I think he is a ghost. I'm pretty sure that a tagline for the movie was like the ghost with the most.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. He's a ghost.
Is Beetlejuice a ghost? Tell us.
I'm pretty sure he's a ghost. Is Theo a ghost?
Maybe. He pretty haunting.
He went to leave. Goodbye, Theodore. Oh, he just sang right here. Well, I think that's it for our haunted house movies. We hope that you'll check them out. Enjoy this week's category. If you've seen Beetlejuice, let us know. We have not, so we can't say anything about it.
No.
Check those out, and we'll be back next week to introduce our final category, holidays. But before we get there, make sure that you suggest movies for our final 3 movies of the month. We have our 3 open slots at the end, as we always do. We'll take your suggestions, have voting on those, and then our 3 winners will get to introduce their selected movies when we get to the last 3 days of the month. So that should be available on the Substack right now. There will be a link to the suggestion box. You can go ahead and make your suggestions for our movies for this month.